hotel blocks and signing into contracts that can be potentially very have a lot of liability if the meeting's not successful. I think we're just going to have to bite the bullet and not get into that type of contract, pay up front for AV and whatever other costs. And the writing was on the wall even before that because of things like Airbnb and people opting for cheaper options anyway. So I think that's just going to be the model for the future, and that's not a want. We will have to do that.
All right, thank you. Basil, you have your hand up.
I think we're going to make the concerted effort to focus a lot more of our content and opportunities to our students and our younger professionals. As many people are probably seeing, the reasons for joining professional societies have probably changed over 30 years. And, while most younger professionals feel connected because they have one of these, right, cell phones, they're probably not getting the same level of professional connection that'll help them as they move into their career. So I think whatever we end up doing with our hybrid events, which is still TBD, we're definitely going to target that segment of our population.
Is there a particular approach or way to implement that kind of a procedure that you have in mind?
Well, I definitely think we're going to have to keep a pretty strong virtual piece because, most of the students and the younger professionals who are just starting out, at work don't often have the money or resources to travel, right? So I think it's going to be through a combination of, events that we might do the week at the conference, but there may be things before or after where we'll do things that might be topics that are connected to a conference, but we have virtual sessions that we can engage them in because we know they're just not going to be able to travel, including some smaller, we set up a whole mentoring website and we've been doing a lot of that this year. I've probably talked to 25 different students at some point, but it's just trying to get people connected.
Yeah, I guess the key is just to make sure that the awareness is high enough that students know how to connect, when to do it, and are prepared.
Yeah. Plus, it works out a lot better for their schedules, especially for things that are taped, right? They can go watch it at their leisure rather than having to decide whether or not to go to class versus watching the session, right?
Right. All right, thank you, Basil. Any other hands or points people want to make? Anne?
So
And it looks like you're frozen or while trying to make your point.
International participants or younger participants who didn't have resources. For me, it's a little harder to think about what am I going to be forced to do. And I feel like as a small society, our meetings are around 500 people, or traditionally have been in the past 500 people in person. As a society of all challenges of stored content, and I think those things pose a lot of challenges for us. So we're trying to walk a fine line between providing opportunities, because we know we have to move away from just traditional in-person meeting, but how do we do that in a way that's sustainable in an all volunteer kind of smaller meeting setting?
I'm not sure how everyone else heard your points, Anne, but for me, I got about half of it because your connection was a little tenuous, and so part of your discussion was cut off. Maybe if you could just briefly reiterate, the first couple of points you made, that might be helpful while we're waiting for other people to chime in and raise their hands.
Yeah, I've gotten kicked out 3 times in the last 10 minutes, so connection is not great. I apologize.
I'm sorry about that.
Just excited about, yeah, no, it's reality, right? excited about the opportunities, engaging students, engaging more international, but struggling with what I'm forced to do. We're small and all volunteers, so, managing pre-recorded online content we don't use professional conference organizers. And so how do we manage that for our society?
Yeah, I think that, this issue of trying to get volunteers to step up and micromanage presentations, rooms, keynote and plenary talks, that's tough, especially for small organizations. That's one of the things that's just going to have to be hashed out in the next several months, several years. This is a big experiment after all, and it's one that's not just going to be dealt with by businesses trying to get meeting organizers to spill out dollars, but for societies to figure out what to present, who to do it, and how to distribute that across the world. Probably a bigger challenge for small organizations than bigger ones. Anyone else have comments or points to make?
I'll just throw one out there, which is something I've been working on the last week or two, is the development of a policy for our in-person meeting, first in-person meeting as the pandemic declines in the US, will be in January of 2022. And our leadership has decided to require vaccination for participation. And so what does that policy look like for vendors who are supporting us, for the staff at the venue itself, for our exhibitors, for our meeting participants, and what are the outs, what are the parameters around it? We know that legally strongly held religious beliefs and underlying medical conditions are clear exceptions to these kinds of policies. How do you accommodate those people should they show up and have those exceptions? And then what's the downside to having such a policy? How do you, what negative feedback from your conference attendees do you have? But I think at least for the time being, everybody is on clear legal ground that if you're a private organizer of an event like this, you can set the boundaries around how those events take place, and keeping liability issues front and center, as I do running an organization. I don't want people to come to the meeting and fall ill who have opted not to be vaccinated. We're not 100% covered, obviously, even with vaccinations, but we're much better covered than if we don't have such a policy in place. So that's one issue that we're going to have to grapple with quite quickly here.
I think I'll chime in one comment here. For the American Vacuum Society, one thing we've noticed during the last year is related to our training. Certainly a lot of people have liked the opportunity to do our training virtually. We found out a lot of trainings that wouldn't run before because there were just not enough people at any given company who wanted the training, and a lot of the companies who had people who had one person there couldn't afford to come to our meetings to have the training. So now we're running a lot of trainings that historically weren't run very much, and we're getting 20 or 30 people from all over the world to do one training. But what a lot of the people being trained are missing and they're asking for is, gee, I'd really like to ask you a question that we're having at our particular company or university, and I don't necessarily want anyone else to know what we're doing. And so they want that one-on-one sort of time when they'd pull you aside during lunch or something like that and ask you those questions. But they want it, kind of virtually, and we don't quite know how to do that yet, unless they just, contact the trainer at some later point by email or something like that, which they do. So, but there's a need there that we don't quite know how to deal with, that naturally happened in person and doesn't as easily happen virtually.
Yeah, I suspect that's one of those kind of questions or settings that's just going to naturally hash out. But it occurs to me that at least the virtual meeting puts one person in touch with another, even though several others are listening on the side. And then once an email is exchanged or the address where the person can actually get in touch with you by Spike, excuse me, by Zoom or Spike or just personal email, then the more private interaction can take place.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I just throw one thing out there. We kind of solved that in a similar situation where we have career advice sessions. So we have webinars that are sort of like how to network effectively, how to promote yourself in the academic job market, et cetera. And then we have follow-up sessions that the presenter schedules for, has a schedule that she'll interact with students or early career people who might want more detailed advice about that. And we had really good uptake so that her time schedule block was completely filled. And so that facility can take place to allow one-to-one interactions.
So it almost sounds like virtual office hours.
It is almost like virtual office hours. So they're scheduled, but more people show up.
Okay.
So, right. I mean, office hours, I always ended up talking to my professors and they're like, yeah, I have office hours, but no one ever shows up. But yeah, for us, it worked really well for these early career people. They were able to get one-on-one advice and discussion, even a review of their CV, giving them recommendations for how to make changes. And just 15, 30-minute blocks were structured. So about 7 hours of the consultant's time, and she was completely full. And we ended up opening up an extra day of time for more people to get that help. So that parallels the need that you identified, where people might want to have one-on-one conversations with these presenters in a private way. Vicki?
Thanks, Kevin. I want to echo or build on one of the comments that you put in the chat about these spontaneous, air quotes, spontaneous meetings, small meetings. If we want to put something into what I want to see happen category, that's one of the things. I just think this idea of having a theme-oriented, one question-oriented, almost crowdsourcing ideas of spontaneous meetings, and the challenge for us, for the professional organizations, is what do we add as value added? Because right now those things are happening all the time. So what we're trying to figure out is it the curation of the outcomes of that? Is it having a broader network for people to clue into when they're doing it? So that's a want to. That's one of our want to dreams. I really advocate for how we can explore those kind of ideas and move it forward. And then this whole thing about requiring vaccinations for meetings. I mean, that's a hot topic with us because our meeting is in October this year. And we have decided not to require vaccinations. And mainly it's because I just don't have a clue how we would enforce that from the get-go. I mean, I just don't I just don't know. And so I don't know if you folks have thought about that more or not, but that seems to be a real sticking point.
Yeah, we'll be pursuing it through, personal, at the registration point, certifying as an individual that they've been vaccinated, and then, saying that we may even go down the path of having them upload an image of their vaccination card. Of course, the idea that they are now being forged online was not a comforting fact. But at least if you get them to personally certify and it ends up later that they were not, then the liability doesn't fall on you as a meeting organizer at that point, which, I hate to go down the legal side of things, but that's what I'm most concerned about. I was going to say one want to that I've been thinking about throughout the pandemic was that I watched all of the normal seminar and colloquia that take place in academic departments suddenly go virtual. And not only were they marketing to the people in their department or institution that would normally attend, but some groups started to market it and go to a broader audience. And I thought, whoa, that's a missing piece of scientific dialogue that really should be under the umbrella of scientific organizations. So what would it look like for us to curate and gather those virtual presentations that are taking place all the time throughout all of academia? What would it look like for the professional organizations to sort of be the go-to place, maybe even with upvoting of the most exciting colloquia for the week, in a sort of a social media standpoint? And that requires some building of infrastructure, and I haven't got my head around how we might go about it. And it requires the more prestigious organizations to sort of give up on the idea that they can just centrally archive their content in one place and that's good enough. Could they share it out to the professional organization? And it also talks to enabling smaller departments to have the capabilities to record those colloquia and get them uploaded or at least shared through a central database kind of thing. So that's one of the things that I'm really wanting to work on in the next couple of years, is to help capture that gray literature, gray presentations that don't get shared, but you hear about through the grapevine all the time. I've heard someone say, "Oh, did you hear about that colloquia that was at Caltech 2 weeks ago? Everyone's talking about it." Well, no, and I'm not going to be able to see it because it wasn't recorded. So I think that's a really big missing asset in academia and scholarly research right now, that we really, as professional societies, would benefit from trying to solve and provide resource there. Horatio?
We had a virtual meeting. We have our main annual meeting and then a smaller meeting that's more of a sort of a winter school. And this was the first year that we did it virtually. And of course, it was wonderful and horrible at the same time in two different ways. The experience of interaction was much worse because people weren't face to face, but our ability to get speakers from just about anywhere and get really the top names of any field was much greater. And so this is the fear going forward as we move to more in-person meetings, is that getting an international speaker to come to a meeting virtually because they're in their living room is much cheaper and much more accessible than actually bringing someone and bringing the top people in the field in. So, what I'd like to see going forward is not just a consideration for a hybrid model where some of the attendees are virtual, but also some of the speakers might be virtual, even in a face-to-face meeting, if we need to bring in the best person or the top person in a given field, but we can't actually afford to fly them there.
Yeah, thanks, Horatio. It occurs to me that YouTube was originally developed and built just for that reason that Kevin was talking about, and you too, Horatio, that individuals can simply, from the comfort of their own home, upload any presentations, performance, whatever they like. And then the question is one that Kevin addressed, which is, how do you basically curate that content? A lot of it's probably junk, even among those professors or engineers or scientists who are well-intentioned. They just haven't put together a good presentation. So which are the best contents worth spreading among society members? Well, someone would have to curate that. So the question is, what volunteers do you call upon to do the job? Do you ask universities to basically send societies, or update them that in fact something's online on a YouTube channel and ready to be evaluated, let's say? So it occurs to me that something is available and ready to go. The question is just how to curate it. So we have about 2 minutes to go before we jump out of the breakout session and back in the plenary. Does anyone else want to chime in with ideas that no one yet has presented? Because I think that's one challenge of the group is, what ideas were or what novel insight was generated during the discussion.
One of the interesting things that's going on at the American Association of Physics Teachers is this small meeting idea. And in particular, as the broader impacts part of one or two different NSF grants, these small meetings have been put forward as ways of cross-cutting emphases between grants and allowing other people to listen to information.
Thanks, Jack.
I'm kind of curious if Angela can elaborate on her early comment about avoiding the use of the word hybrid, and that along with the idea that we don't want to make our virtual participants second class. Those are two key concepts that have been resonating with me today.
Yeah, I hate raising a problem and not having an answer. I'm just concerned that moving from a all virtual environment to a hybrid or whatever the next stage is, people are expecting that they're going to get everything. And I'm concerned that hybrid can imply that. Again, don't know how to, I think it's very important, as you said, that they don't feel like a second class. I think you need to have value add, whether it be online collaboration tools. I think we need to think about, are there ways to collaborate as the full group, but is there a way to collaborate or plan for the subset that is remote only? So I'm raising a lot of questions and not answers here, but it's all going to be expectation and communication, right? I don't have a better word, and we all use it. So I think it may be here to stay.
Blended comes to mind as an alternate word than hybrid, but every word that you might think of is loaded, with their own, particular connotations or expectations. Blended is pretty neutral, but it's a possibility. I suspect that will shake out as meetings occur, change, grow, happen. Anyway, having said that, it looks like we're about ready to be knocked out of this room in just a few seconds. So thanks again for everybody for joining.